If you were planning to go through Colorado on a train back in 1948, this is the car you'd want to be on, the Silver Pine with the Denver Rio Grande California Zephyr. Come on, let's get on board. Hi, we're in the corridor of the Silver Pine car. It was built in 1948 by Budd Manufacturing. Here's their advertisement to the railroads to buy their cars. Their competitor was Pullman Standard, but Budd had a better technique in manufacturing. We are in the Silver Pine now. It was originally built as a 16-section sleeper. Sections. What are sections? You've probably seen old Three Stooges movies where they have the curtain, they have the upper bunk, but it's not a separate room. That's what sections were. It's now a 42-seat coach. It is our first-class coach, which is a little bit higher service than our regular excursion coaches. We have more comfortable chairs and fewer passengers that you have to interface with. So this car was converted from its sleeper sections to coaches in 1964. They added the little holders for your seat checks and a number assignment, light switches, and a luggage rack that were not in the original sections for the sleepers. So we're coming to the end of the car, and I did want to show to you a little decal that dates back from the days when it ran as a Vista Dome car, which is a dome car. And this car was not a dome car, but there were several dome cars on the train that ran on the California Zephyr. The California Zephyr was a really unique situation. And I'm going to take a seat here and tell you the rest of my story. So I have a story to tell you about the cars of the California Zephyr. California Zephyr was a really unique concept. It was actually 3 railroads that ran a through service from Chicago. There were other railroads that ran their own standalone rail service because they owned their own track. But the California Zephyr was a combination operation between the Western Pacific in California, the Denver and Rio Grande from Salt Lake City to Denver, and then the Burlington Route from Denver on into Chicago. They bought the cars together and they swapped them back and forth freely. It seemed seamless. They had on board what we'd call stewardesses. They were called Zephyrettes. And if we didn't already get the picture, there's a decal on the wall of the Vista Dome. And so this car ran seamlessly from Chicago to LA and back. But the railroads started to lose money on passenger service. And one by one, they asked the federal government to take over passenger service in 1971. That's where Amtrak came from. But there were 2 railroads that did not participate. One was the Southern out of Atlanta. They ran the Crescent from DC to New Orleans. They gave up their routes to Amtrak after a few years. So the last holdout was the Denver Rio Grande Western. They kept this car. They ran the Rio Grande Zephyr as a day train only from Denver to Salt Lake City and back every other day and no service on Wednesdays. Then finally in 1983, they decided that they too were going to give their route rights to Amtrak. And Amtrak would start running the Amtrak cars through the scenic canyons of Colorado, through Glenwood Springs, Ruby Canyon, and the other canyons that are so scenic in that area. The Amtrak made plans to begin these runs in April of 1983. So people who were interested in railroads wanted to ride the Denver Rio Grande Zephyr before Amtrak took over the route. And so they announced when it was going to be. My wife and I bought tickets. We decided not to book our tickets for the last run. We decided to take the run about 10 days in advance of the termination of service. So we're on the train, we're having our trout, we're in the dome cars, we're really enjoying ourselves. We're about 3/4 of the way to Salt Lake City, and all of a sudden we slow way down. We look out the window of the dining car, and there are bulldozers, scoop loaders, backhoes, guys in helmets and vests and so on. We didn't know what was going on. Well, we got past this area, got to our hotel. The next morning, we turned on the television, and the lead story in the news was rail service to Colorado cut off, massive mudslide in Thistle, Utah. They had been holding the hillside back to get that passenger train through. I asked the station agent, I said, well, what do we do? He says, where are your tickets for? I said, we're going to Denver. And he said, you're in luck. You're going to ride our train, the California Zephyr rail cars, through Wyoming over the Union Pacific. If you had had tickets to Glenwood Springs or Grand Junction, you'd be riding a bus. like our conductor. You've never seen a madder conductor, he said. So by going early, we got the last complete round trip out of Salt Lake City because they terminated the rest of the runs in Grand Junction. And also we got a ride over the Union Pacific. So the moral of the story is don't put off to the last minute something that's important for you to do. This is my favorite story about the Silver Pine car who was on that train in 1983. So after Amtrak took over the Rio Grande Zephyr and turned it into the California Zephyr using the Amtrak Superliner cars, this car was no longer needed for passenger traffic. Amtrak did not want it. So it was sold to Gateway Rail, and it was kept in storage for the longest time, but ASTA bought it from them in 2010. And it's one of our favorite cars on the train, the Silver Pine of the Denver Rio Grande Western. So we're back outside the Silver Pine, and you might have noticed that this is California Zephyr car number 23. It was one of 100 different types of cars. They had sleepers, they had diners, they had domes, and they had the sections, and then the coach that this car became. And up high, you can see it says DRGW. So those markings would have been taken away had Amtrak used the car. But the only revenue service this car has ever been in is for the California Zephyr, the Rio Grande Zephyr, and for Austin Steam Train Association. So looks like we're running out of time on my pocket watch here. We want to thank you for viewing our video today and hope you'll come and ride. You can order tickets online at austinsteamtrain.org. If you simply want to support our restoration efforts, you'll also find a donate button at the same place, austinsteamtrain.org, and we have YouTube videos of which this is one. We thank you for watching. I'm Steve Hanson. Have a great day.